when you sit here on the other side of the microphone and you're like, who are you? And I'm like, yeah, it's a great question, because I am all these things, but sometimes we're running so fast we don't stop long enough to be like, wait, who am I really when I'm not a mom, when I'm not a wife, when I'm not a business owner? Like, what am I? Who am I?
We started out by kind of talking about how we go to marketing events or you go to networking events or you're in a new room and people are always like, so what do you do? And it's one of the most annoying questions to me because I want to know who you are. And you're so much more than what you do. Tell our listeners a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I really do hate that question as well. So I'm glad we jive on that. I am sort of a how would you say, accidental person in that I don't even know how I got here. Nothing in my life has been sort of intentional. So I feel like as I tell my story, it sounds like a bunch of random accidental twists and turns, but then I'm like, maybe that's how everybody feels. Maybe everyone kind of looks back and goes, huh, this is not where I expected to be. And so I grew up in a pretty conservative Christian environment. I grew up with sort of the goal to become a wife and mom. I didn't have a lot of career aspirations. I got married very young. I think I know I could drink at my wedding. My husband could not. He was 19. We were young. And we had 3 babies really fast. And I was barely a grown up myself. I did not have a career. I graduated college 7 months pregnant with my first child. And so I never got into the workforce. And I pretty much was pregnant and breastfeeding for 6, 7 years, raising babies, in full transparency, trying not to lose my mind. Underneath all of that, I was pretty depressed. I was pretty restless. I had a lot of ambition. I was smart. I had a lot of energy, and I was stuck at home changing diapers. And so I took to the internet in 2007 to try to get out of my life, just an outlet. And I started writing this ridiculous blog about my faith, about my kids, about, being broke and just all of those things. And I started to get an audience. It was the mom blog, heyday. And so that's sort of how I entered the world that I'm in now. And then through a series of accidents, ended up in this multi-million dollar marketing empire that I didn't even mean to create. But at my core, I am a musician. I am a writer. I love Jesus. I'm a Christian. I'm a mom of 4 children. I don't know who decided it was a good idea for me to be a mom, but here I am. They are now, 16, 17, 19. Then I have my little oops baby who's 7. So that's sort of a brief introduction of Julie, the human.
I love it. I love it. Isn't it funny how we start out with a question of who you are? And part of your journey was actually identifying to yourself who you are. Like it's not just a young woman thing. I think it's a lot of young people go through life and they just go through the motions. They try to appease everyone else around them, their families, their their entire circle. And then they wake up one day and they're like, what is this? And it's hard to find that in your own world until you step out and start to identify who you are, what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are still figuring all that out. So it's
I
pretty
was like,
natural.
I'm not sure I'm there. I'm not sure I'm there yet. Like, it just keeps being these accidental paths that I take, and it feels so random. And yet I have a pretty strong faith. So I believe that everything happens for a reason. And I believe that, like, there is something that I'm supposed to do in the journey. But for people, like, I mean, yes, I run a big business that's doing really well and I have a lot of followers. But when you sit here on the other side of the microphone and you're like, who are you? And I'm like, yeah, it's a great question, because I am all these things, but sometimes we're running so fast we don't stop long enough to be like, wait, who am I really when I'm not a mom, when I'm not a wife, when I'm not a business owner? Like, what am I? Who am I?
Yeah, I think it can often be challenging. And we talk a lot on this podcast about the imbalance of life. And, I think there's a formula that people think they can follow to have perfection, right?
Yeah.
And they'll have perfect balance. You'll be the perfect mom at home. You'll be the perfect dad. You'll be the perfect business owner. You'll make millions of dollars. And the reality is that's probably not true, right? And
No.
it's never been true. And anyone that believes it, it's like having the perfect body, right? There's
Yeah,
there's no such thing. If someone else across from you looks at you, they're the ones identifying in their minds what they think is the perfect body. It is completely different than what you think it is.
exactly. Exactly.
And so you found your way, and talk a little bit about that journey, because it's
Sure.
really interesting. You found yourself in a divorce and a challenge, and you were like, I got to figure this out, and I don't have a lot of time.
Yeah,
Walk us through that.
sure. It's a little bit like there's a little bit of some Jerry Springer vibes going on in this story, but I'm going to give it to you the real story. So, it was the summer of 2014. I had been married for 12 years. I'd been with my first husband for 16. We were dating since 15, age 15, I think, something like that. And we had some pretty traumatic stuff happen. We realized we were going to get a divorce. Well, I had never dated anyone as an adult because I got married so young, right? So I was with one person. So I get out onto the dating scene, and guess what is just come on the market? Like in 2014, it was Tinder. And I was at a blogging conference, and they were like, you got to download this app and you swipe right. And now I say it's funny because we have all these apps, but at the time it was like a new thing. Well, I swiped right on this very cute Romanian soccer coach. Um, and I got pregnant on the first date.
Oh no.
And I was like, God, that's funny. That's really funny. Like I was like, first of all, I made lots of poor choices. You can just, deduce yourself that having sex on the first date probably wasn't a great idea. But nonetheless, I laughed because I was done having children. And my third child, when she was born, had a heart defect. I had terrible postpartum depression. She almost died. I was done. And now I was just newly divorced and now pregnant with basically a stranger's child. And I tell the story now, and it's funny, like when you're going through something like that, you're just doing what you have to do. And then afterwards you look back and you're like, wow, that was really effed up. Like that was really messed up. And so I scrambled around. I basically looked at my little business. My business at the time was writing, which was making me like $500 a month. And I was doing like WordPress stuff because I was really good at WordPress. And I was like, oh, I can make more money. So I was like, all right. So I started charging people to do their WordPress sites. And I was up to like maybe $3,000 a month. Now I'm getting divorced. I have no money. I mean, I have a little money and I'm pregnant. So I went and found a job at a college as a marketing person. I got a full-time job so that I could get health insurance so that I wouldn't have to pay out of pocket to have the baby. And then I moonlighted my web design business. And this was when I discovered that like marketing and funnels, you could charge a lot more, but it was the same skill, writing, copy, design. It was the same skill as web design, but I could charge like 10,000 a funnel and I was charging like $3,000 a website. So I started that shift while I was pregnant. I would go to work 8 to 3. I'd come home. I'd take a nap from 3 to 5 and I'd get up at 5 and I'd start moonlighting my marketing web design business. And I'd work from like 5 to 11. So by the time William was born 9 months later, I had enough saved up to take a maternity leave. And then I never returned to the college. Within probably a year and a half, I had gone from making $10,000 a month, $7,000 to $10,000 a month, which was a huge success for me. And I had my first like $90,000 month. And it was because I was building all these funnels as an agency and I was doing a really good job making people all kinds of money. And I was like, I should really do this for myself, like this is like, it took me way too long to figure that out. And so I built my own funnel and I did a really good job and I hit $90,000 in 1 month. And I remember it was right at the end of 2016. I still didn't have my kids back full time because I wasn't making enough money. I was in a rental and my ex was taking care of them during the week and I had them during the weekend. And I was like, I want my kids back. Like I was their stay-at-home mom. Like I was like the quintessential Christian stay-at-home mom. And now I only saw them on the weekends. And so that hustle and that drive to make enough to get a house big enough to have them back was, I think, really what made me go so fast. And so I counted the days from it was 547 days that it took me from the moment at which I didn't, have them full time to bringing them back full time. And I did that while having a fourth baby. So it was tiring. But yeah, so by 2017, I had them back. I bought a yellow farmhouse in Cheshire. I had saved up $90,000 for a down payment. I put it down. I bought a house. I was married to my second husband at the time. And I was like, okay, maybe this is not an accident. Maybe like this is actually going to be something. But that was just my little marketing agency business. Funnel Gorgeous didn't even exist until another year later.
Wow. That is you had a little bit of Springer in there,
A little
and
bit.
but it was a light Springer. It sounds like it was just you dated the same person and married the person, had 3 children with the person, then went out into this world that was way too big. I've never ever experienced that Tinder or any of that stuff because I got married really young. I dated my wife in college,
Yep.
and none of this existed. We're so that my only experience in that world has been watching friends do it and then
Yeah.
guiding them along the way occasionally with some swipes. But it is ultimately, I have one question that's off the beaten path, then I want to come back.
Sure.
But does your youngest son, William, play soccer?
No. He tried. He tried, but he actually I'm a musician, I'm a pianist. He actually is very talented at the piano. So I think he got the music gene, not the soccer gene. One detail of the story that I'm missing, well, there's actually quite a few, but one of the reasons that I got married so fast was because the person I was dating um needed was about to be deported, not deported, but like their visa. They were on a visa. The thing with Tinder is that it's location based of who's in the location at the
Right.
time. And so he was here in Connecticut, but he was here just for travel, like for work for a little while. And so um he said, I got to go back, to Romania. And this was not a great relationship, by the way. But I was like, well, when do you have to go back? And it was like right when the baby was due. So I went over to a lawyer and I was like, what do I do? She's like, go to the courthouse and get married. And that's the only way you can keep him in the country legally. I was like, I just got divorced. She's like, you want the father in the country when the baby's born? Go marry him. And so I did. And that's why I forgot that detail.
Well, that's a great detail. And life is messy. I mean, everybody understands it. The most successful people I know had messiness in their life, either something they cleaned up inside or something they had to clean up outside. But
Absolutely.
but it goes in lots of different directions. I also love the fact that when you talk about your story, you say, okay, they were all these, I call it the scatter plots, right? There's all these scatter plots all over the place, and none of them seem to go together. And we've talked about this in previous
Yeah.
podcasts, but then you look back and they're all in this line, almost like it was meant to be exactly as it was laid out. And I do find that that's something as you get older, you start to feel really good about directionally. Like you're like, okay, well, I don't know if this is the right decision right now, but it's the best decision right now. And if it's the best decision right now, I'm probably putting myself in a good position for the future. And you get this faith that goes beyond yourself. And I would imagine that's what it looks like when you look back on the story.
Yeah, I think, there are moments like I'm very transparent about the fact that I have had a lot of success in business and I've had a lot of failure in my personal life. And like you were saying about balance, like we all want the perfect body, the perfect relationships, the perfect children and parenting and the perfect business. And I've never experienced that. I've experienced tremendous success in business, and tremendous failure in my personal life. And when I look back, I see how a lot of that failure has made me a better business owner in understanding people and humility and forgiveness and taking the high road, and not judging as best you can when you see things that you don't necessarily agree with. And at the same time, I look back and I have regret too. And I was actually just talking to someone about this book. Now I can't remember, but how regret is actually a sign of growth. Because if you don't regret anything in your past, that usually means that you're in the same sort of headspace. And I look back and I'm like, why did I do that? And why did I do that? And that to me signals that I'm growing, that I'm maturing, that I can look back and be like, those I'm not going to judge myself for what I did in survival mode. At the same time, I'm going to say, okay, I'm a different person now. And honestly, I think our society doesn't do a great job of giving people the chance to grow. We tend to box people in, we cancel people. We'd say once you do this once, you're forever. And I think about people who struggle with addictions and like who who need 6 or 7 times in rehab before they get it together, and we're just quick to put people in a box. And I have learned that that's not the way to do it, and I think I wouldn't have been as understanding had I not had my own sets of failures along the way.
Yeah, what a great perspective. It's really interesting to me because there is this part of life where people want to box you into who you were, not who you've become.
Yeah.
And, we all want to be a little better version of ourselves the next day. I mean, I wake up every day and I'd like to be a better husband, a better father. I'd like to be more faithful and more grounded. I'd like to be a better leader to my company. Everything is about working towards a little bit better. And when I say that, I don't mean that I'm unhappy with who I am. It's just a matter of knowing that once you knew, you use this example, once you knew that you could turn $3,000 into $10,000 by changing from website to funnel, why the heck did you not want to do it? Then you knew that the funnel would allow you to turn funnel into your own product that you could launch and make $90,000 you made from doing it. Now, if you could actually make more by
Right.
owning it
Right.
and doing it for yourself, this is the same thing with personal growth to me. It's the same
Yeah.
concept. Once you know there's a better version out there, you should strive to some extent to attain it. But you also have to have a little bit of, we have to have a little bit of grace for ourselves, because you go back occasionally to the version of yourself you're not always happy with, and it's not perfect. It's going to be a growth time. So, how have you mended? So you said that there was a separation between business and personal life in some capacity. How have you correlated the worlds together to have a more complete or feeling more confident in both spaces? Because obviously it's come together in a really good way for you.
Yeah. Well, so I think that an unfortunate part of my story is that because of this unplanned pregnancy, foreign relationship, I am, because of my background, my upbringing, I really wanted that to work. I didn't want to have, I wanted to do my best, give it my best shot. So I ended up married to someone who was pretty dysfunctional. I didn't know him that well. There was a lot of mishaps. But what I learned in this process is that it is better to cut your losses faster than to continue to ignore your gut and keep trying. And I didn't seem to get this in my personal life, but in business, I would notice when things weren't working, I would cut my losses, even if it felt like, oh, that was tough, right? It was a tough pill to swallow. Like, okay, that funnel fails, or that person isn't a good hire. I'm not going to just like prolong it, right? So I got faster at being decisive about my decisions. And I noticed that I got really good at also ignoring lots of noise, and it allowed me to scale quickly, right? Because I was so focused. Meanwhile, in my personal life, I'm playing out this childhood trauma of like trying to get someone's potential, and all this kind of stuff. And so um I also started to have teenagers. And I don't know if you have do you have teenagers
I
yet?
have two right now, 14 and 17.
Yes. Okay. So teenagers are like a different species of human. And so I have to say that for a couple years, work was my escape. And I felt a lot of regret for my divorce. I felt sad, for my current setup. I felt like, gosh, I'm back at square one with diapers and all this kind of stuff. And so work was an escape. So for 2018, 2019, I worked way, way, way too much. And 2020 sort of stopped the whole world, and it stopped me in my tracks too. And so I stopped traveling as much. I had made a fair amount of money. I think at that point, I was making about 2.5 million a year. I had plenty. COVID stopped everything. And this is where I started to kind of fall back in love with things that I had left. I fell back in love with, like, my kids make fun of me, but like nature and bird watching and gardening and all of these things. And I think that really recentered me. And so when we kind of came out of the pandemic in 2021, I realized, okay, I got to make some decisions here. Like, I can continue to grind in this really bad relationship, but I have a lot of places that I'm going. My kids need me, and I need to perform, and I need to not be running into work to escape my personal life. And so I actually filed for divorce from my second husband in 2022, refocused on my kids, shrunk my workday down to 6 hours from 12 hours, stopped traveling so much. I actually was in the ClickFunnels world for a couple years. I don't know if you know that, but I was like VP over there. I left that. I just like shrunk my world so that I could expand it, but in a way that felt good for me. And that was messy, and that came with financial loss, and that came with a lot of pain, but it was ultimately me making right the mistake that I had done 8 years ago that I didn't want to look at.
Yeah. That's powerful. And so you went through this journey and you had this awakening. And sometimes the awakening is something slamming the brakes in front of us to not allow us to move forward anymore. And 2020 was that for a lot of people. I mean, it was a lot for me.
Yeah.
I could tell you, I woke up one day and I had a personal trainer I'd gone to for 12, 13 years, and I couldn't go to the gym.
Yep.
And then I had nowhere to be in the office. I had to
Yep.
still run the business. Oh, and we're losing revenue at a significant rate. And we just hired 5 new people. And all these things are spinning. And all of a sudden you have to center.
Yeah.
And it is pretty easy to fall in love with nature and the sound of birds chirping and the quieting of your brain that's been so damn busy that you couldn't even think for yourself.
Yeah.
And
It
right.
was it was so, like, it was scary because, and I have realized that so much of my life when I have anxiety, it's really just me not wanting to face what my gut is telling me. And my gut is often right. My intuition is often right. I just hate what it freaking says. I'm just like, nope, that's not what you're saying. I don't want to hear it. And so in this relationship specifically, I had that churning anxiety, and I just kept not wanting to listen to myself. What ended up happening is I ended up shutting down my gut on all kinds of things. And so I had to kind of do this really painful, like, giving myself permission. But the outflow of it was that, like, 2020, 2021, like, things grew, and I was able to kind of find myself again. Even though on the outside it was like, oh, she got another divorce, like, what the hell's the matter with her, right? Well, there's a lot matter with me, but it was actually making right something that I was not wanting to make right for so many years.
Yeah, not giving a damn what other people think is a really powerful thing, though.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the noise, the outside noise, it's really the other people's opinions. It's people that
100%.
that they cheer you when you're winning and they jeer you when you're losing. And they're not the people that are really going to be there for you in the long run. We talked a little bit earlier about how people want to be who they are today, not who they were. And I always
Mhm.
find this interesting with old friends. I've had really long relationships with friends for many, many years. Some have grown really, really strong. Some have gotten weaker and they're acquaintances and they're almost not as close. But the ones that knew me in what I consider the raw version, that are still my best friends or really close friends today, almost give me a peace just being around them. Sometimes there's this
Yeah.
peace because I've now identified what noise is. I've now identified what makes me click, and we all accept each other for who we were, who we are, and then we look forward to who we're going to be one day.
Yeah.
And that's hard to find. And I think people, sometimes it's a good reminder of our circles. right? It's a good reminder of the people we surround ourselves with and whether or not they're building us up or tearing us down. And
My circle has shrunk significantly. That was one of the things that I did in 2020. I had grown fast. I became sort of this I got on the radar of some big names in 2018. Like I said, I was, VP over at ClickFunnels. I was running the Two Comma Club coaching program. I was invited to be owner. I was under my old name, Julie Stoyan, and I was on the funnel hacking live stage and all this attention and energy and like, oh my gosh. And then I had to get really honest with what I valued, what I cared about. And, I have this little saying that like who you trust should be on a 1-inch piece of paper. And if you can't fit those, whatever you can fit on that 1-inch piece of paper, those are the people you trust for their opinion, their advice, their feedback, and then everyone else's noise. It's easy to say, it's not as easy to do. And when you build like a public persona, people do want to impose their ideas of who you are and their values and what they know about you. And sometimes it's hard to break free from that. So it's been a little bit of a struggle. I've been more introverted in the last year than I think I've been my entire career as an internet marketer. But I'm just like, I'm learning to figure out how to give my energy in a way that's not going to deplete me and cause me to get all of this feedback that I really don't need to hear. I just need to keep moving with the people that I care about.
well, it's one of the challenges of that extroverted trait and that the ability to connect is when we're able to connect, sometimes that turned up too loud is us trying to save someone, trying to
Yeah.
protect someone, trying to force a relationship that might need to be cut, like you mentioned earlier. And introversion is almost the exact recipe for success because going inward allows you to get centered to that gut, and then it allows us to push forward through it because the mind and the gut are connected.
Yes.
And it's very, very evident. Science will obviously tell you this. Every health doctor, good functional medicine doctor, anybody out there will tell you the connection's real. So when we listen to it, it's empowering, but you can't hear it if everyone else is sucking the noise out of you. If everybody is taking your time and looking at you as a way for them to make money, for them to elevate their career versus you just being the pawn. Now you shift to being the king or the queen and you shift around that chessboard in a way that you're centered.
Yeah. I mean, there's a dark side to success and money. And I was very naive. I mean, I was naive relationally when I like exited my first marriage and I showed up and it was Tinder and I was like, "Oh, I've never dated," and I was very naive about money and I'm very trusting normally. And the more successful I got, the more money I made, the more obvious it became how shitty my boundaries were because I had people asking for money, people looking for partnerships, people, taking advantage, people trying to extort me. I had to get lawyers involved. I had to get police involved, and it was like, I was like this open book and I'm like, crap, this was maybe I need some bigger gates here. And, I'm grateful for my success and I'm grateful for everything that's happened, but I also have a lot of legal expenses and I have a lot of like expenses around protecting my energy field and my home and because people have bad intentions and it's been very hard to figure out who's my friend because they want to be my friend and who's my friend because they want proximity or money or things like that. And that's been tricky to navigate.
Yeah, that's and it's also it hurts. I think
Well,
the one
yeah,
thing that's
that
I mean
too.
the emotional frustration of that and how used you feel is one of the things that is very challenging. Learning to give without expectation was something that I had to learn through
Mhm.
the years where when I was giving something financial, time, anything, I had to let go of what I thought the result should be
Yep.
and hold on to the fact that I was giving, and that was actually the greatest feeling I would ever have. And it's not going to get better than that. It only is good when you give it. It's not really good to watch. Now it's great to see the success down the line, or if someone amplifies it, it's like mentorship, right? What an awesome thing. But if it doesn't work that way, it's very, very challenging, and emotionally it's taxing. It's painful. Almost, I would imagine, as painful as for many of the listeners, you mentioned having teenagers sometimes, as they find themselves and they move and they try to separate to find themselves. We just talked about how hard it is for grown adults to find who we are, let alone, pre-adulthood, how challenging that moment of our lives was.
Yeah.
And as a parent, that's really, really challenging. How old are your children now?
So William is about to be 8, and then I have a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 19-year-old.
Okay.
So I'm 42. So it's funny because I'm right, like all the parents, like my 7-year-old, I feel like I'm
Yeah.
like in the right pocket, right? With my set, because I was 34 when I had him. I'm like, oh, okay, but they all have 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and then I have these 3 teenagers over here that are like put so much gray hair on my head, and I'm not sure if I'm going to survive it. And like, who thought this was a good idea? And, it's funny. I talked to my parents about it, and I'm like, you guys didn't have to raise teenagers in the era of Snapchat. So sit down.
I went to, we do a Sunday dinner every single weekend with my family, and my mom cooks, and my dad cooks, and together they host us, and my sister comes over with her 2 daughters. She's been a single mom for a lot of years, and they're both teenagers. And teenagers. One of them's a grown adult now. She's not a teenager, but the other, my brother comes over. Him and his wife are expecting. It's a good. My teenage boys and my wife and I are all at the table, and my son went to prom last 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and he stayed out a little later than what mom was very comfortable with, and I was uncomfortable with it. But he also said, "Hey, Dad, you can trust me." And so, as a father, I have to kind of have that moment of trust and build on it, because it's a fine line to make them feel like they're still doing the things that are right for the right reasons, and they're still figuring out that they are working towards being a
Yeah.
good kid to some extent, so they can become a good human later, but they also are finding themselves. And I went to the dinner table, Sunday night dinner, and I sat across from my dad and my mom, and I said, "Hey, I wanted to apologize in front of everybody here for one thing, and that is I never understood how hard it must have been for you guys when I was out late all the time." And I
Yeah.
was out, like, my parents were very free. Once we hit like 16 and we could drive, we had a curfew, and then we would stay out. If we had to stay out past the curfew, we'd spend the night at a friend's house. Like, the game was simple. They didn't know where you were. They didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah.
To your point, it was a little bit easier because now we know that Life 360 tells us exactly where they're at and what they're doing. And then they tell you they're this place and they might not be at that
And they're
place.
not
And
there, and
it,
who these friends are, and are they friends, or are like, I mean, I feel old because I feel like I don't understand this younger generation. And I'm like, well, can I have a sleepover with my friends? And I'm like, well, the definition of friends when I was younger is different than the definition of friends now. So like, and so I'm like trying to make all these decisions. And then you just have the constant input of social media, right?
yeah,
Snapchat, especially. What a terrible, terrible, terrible invention is Snapchat. I don't know. But without going on too much on a tangent, I feel like whatever confidence I had as a parent when they were younger, and I could control what they were eating and how they were dressing, and whether their homework was getting done and who their friends were and what influences were good and bad, this has stripped me of all confidence going through the teenage years. And I think to myself, I'm like, all right, well, when William becomes a teenager, I will have done it 3 times, and I'll be like the old wise soul that's like, oh, young Padawan, it's
yeah.
okay. I
It
don't know.
probably it probably doesn't get any better. And ultimately, I think the challenge for a parent is you're losing a part of who you are. This
Yeah.
and that's the problem. You have to. If we want them to be successful adults and perform in life and be good humans, they have to separate from us and be a separate entity, right? But for us, when they're young, they're ours. Like, they're a representation of us.
Yeah.
They're everything that we do. And so there are a lot of older parents now, and older parents have a totally different perspective. And
They
so
do.
I still go to events in the neighborhood behind us all the parents are older, and most of them are older than I am. And I'm like, and I have 2 teenagers, and they're just starting. They have like 2-year-olds.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine restarting right now. But it is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, I think what I love about this kind of a conversation is a high performance life is about all the things that make up your life. And
Mhm.
high performers are everywhere. There are moms out there that are literally stay-at-home moms that are doing everything to keep the family balanced, that are amazing at multiple things. And when they apply themselves one day, potentially into a role like you found, they could change the trajectory of their family. And that's the story. All this comes together because it's part of the journey. It's part, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we talk a little bit about my customers, I know we haven't spent too much time on business, but Funnel Gorgeous, the company actually, is about 70% women. And we have a lot of women who are in that sort of stay-at-home mom role, coming, their kids go to school and starting to start businesses. And, I have a couple of clients now who, are running multi-million dollar businesses teaching parenting. I have one woman who's teaching, she's got a life skills membership for young children, teaching them a new life skill every month. I have women teaching home organization and declutter. I have, women teaching fit pregnancy stuff. And it's just incredible to watch these women build these very successful businesses that completely change the financial trajectory of their lives and of their families' lives, but then also are simultaneously empowering other women to do the same. And it's just this like army of, high performing women, moms that really want a better life for their families and their children. And honestly, I think we're at a point in society where, I mean, not to get all doomsday-ish, but we're at a point where there's a lot of disruption happening in so many industries. I think we're gonna look back on this time and be like, "Man, all of society was changing." I mean, the trajectory, if we just take one sector, right? The education sector. Me growing up, you were homeschooled, you were a weirdo, and if you didn't go to college, you were doomed, right? And now
Right.
we're seeing a massive shift with homeschooling becoming more and more normalized, a lot of criticism on the regular education system, and for 60-70% of people who are not going to be a doctor, a lawyer, teacher, whatever, college is not necessarily like, it's not a scam, but like it's a very expensive, debt crushing, messed up industry that like doesn't make a lot of sense. And we're seeing that in the education, and we're seeing that in the business, and we're seeing disruption in AI and with finances and climate, and like, it's like the world in the next 20 years is probably going to shift very, very rapidly. And we're going to look back and be like, no wonder things felt crazy in 2022 and 2023. Because I think there's a lot shifting, and that's really scary, but also really exciting for people who kind of identify as high performers or identify as entrepreneurs, because wherever there is crisis, there's opportunity. And so that's like an exciting, thrilling thing for people who thrive on challenge and solving problems and changing the world in ways that it needs to be changed.
It's the power of the pivot. I mean, if you can pivot in life versus just jumping into a new direction, and you could take what you've learned and move with it,
Yeah.
you can alter the future. And I think I agree. I still go. My wife's a kindergarten teacher, and I literally will walk into a school and I feel like I'm in prison. I mean, it is to me, it smells bad. It's tight. It's like moldy. It looks like a prison from the outside. The whole education system is absolutely defunct in so many ways. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times I tell my boys, I'm like, hey, just by being different from everybody else and not thinking like everybody else, it's actually getting easier to stand out now. It's getting
Yeah.
easier to be one of the creme de la creme, because you don't have to go to Harvard and become a doctor and do all these things. You could actually run the company that buys the doctor conglomerate
Yeah.
and do way better than the guys that are working 100 hours a week and have no time for their lives, their families, the moms that can't function in both worlds. Like, it's a lot. And so
Yeah.
I think I think you're right. The disruption will bring opportunity.
Mhm.
And we have to look at it that way, but it is always a little tough when you're doing that with your children at a young age, and they're
Yes.
entering that world because you want to guide them the best that you can to that next step. And right now, I mean, it's tough. If you said, "Hey, how important do you think college is?" I would say it's not really important. Kind of like 4 years to go party and have a good time. And they've elevated the cost of it so much that it's not even worth what most people
Well,
have. Yet I'm telling my kids to go to college. So I'm not taking that away from them, right? So
it's a funny discussion because, when I was going through college, it was like if I didn't go through college, I was like the ultimate failure as a human being, right? It was like such a thing. And then I remember as I was growing my business, I was always looking for monetary goals, right? So my first goal was get a house so I could have my kids back, right? And I did that in 2017. And then my next goal was save enough for all three of my kids, my big kids, to go to college. And so in my head, that was $300,000 in cash, 100K for each child, which ironically wouldn't be enough anymore, but that's besides the point. And so I remember I saved the $300,000 and I put it in an account and I put college and I was like, and I did it. And then I was like, okay, what's my next goal? Like, what do I have to save for next? And I'm currently on the goal of trying to get to $300,000 a year of cash flowing real estate investments. That's like my next goal. And I'm at $100,000 in cash flowing real estate with all the assets I have now. So I'm like a third of the way there, which is awesome. But that $300,000 college account is sitting there, and my oldest son is like dabbling in community college. He doesn't really know what he wants to be when he grows up. My second daughter got accepted to all the schools that she applied to and now has decided she doesn't want to go to school. My third is like, I'm never going to college. And I'm like, huh, well, I don't know what the future holds for my three kids, but there's my college account, which is not enough and yet maybe not even going to get used. I don't know.
well, maybe it's used for them starting their own business, and it's actually
Exactly.
an elevation. I think one of the things that when you talk to a lot of high performers, I think I've heard the statistic that 75% of millionaires are first time money earners in their family, meaning that they are like the first generation of millionaires. There's another 25% that's generational, but the majority of millionaires in this country are people that started from the bottom. The
Yes.
way you build generational wealth is you build the same way you have in business. You build upon each level of education and you help your children get to another level. And if that level is, hey, they don't go to college, but they start a business, 50,000 and starting a business and failing, but learning from it and being able to develop the next one is sometimes worth significantly more than the 150 they would have dropped on a literary degree that they won't use in the course of their lifetime.
Well, and I was reading the book Die with Zero, and because again, I'm questioning a lot of the things that I was taught to believe growing up about saving for retirement and the big nest egg for your golden years, and like I'm like working like a freaking dog, and I'm piling up money for when I'm old and can't really use it. And do I want to die and have, my multi-million dollar estate being squabbled over by my kids? And I'm like, this is so stupid. Like, I would rather die with zero. And that's the whole premise of the book. And it doesn't mean die with debt, but die, like, use everything, but like, have you invested the money in my kids, in their lives, in their businesses, in their homes, whatever it is, while I'm here versus piling up money for when I die and they can all just sit and argue. I think about the freaking first episode of what is that show, Succession. And I'm just like, yeah, like there's something really weird about that model. Not to mention, I don't know where the world's going to be in 50 years. So I am really trying to look at all this, capital that I've saved up and say, what's the best way for me to use it now for experiences that my kids and I are going to remember and help set them up for success in business and in life versus just, doing the traditional thing.
I love it. Yeah, I've worked in the financial industry for 21 years. So I own a financial advisory company
Mhm.
and we've helped people achieve these goals for many, many years. And there is truth in the statement that people will inherit money. The children often inherit money and have no idea what to do with it. So much like when you started making money, you said, I didn't really know what I was supposed to be doing with it.
Yeah.
There's this loss. And then they feel like they can't spend, some feel they can't spend it because it's a legacy. And then some feel like, oh, it's mine, I've been waiting for it. And like, it changes the dynamic of relationships. And so I want to go back to one other thing that I think is really important to the listeners. And you started to talk about this, and Funnel Gorgeous is
Yeah.
giving people an opportunity, giving a lot of women an opportunity to start something from the ground up. Let's say, and I'm not, but let's say I'm a single mom and I'm listening to this right now, and I know I'm a high performer. I know I'm meant for something bigger. What are the first steps that I should be doing to put myself in a position to do more? And this could be this could be a school teacher who went into it thinking that it was the greatest thing in the world, and they're not. Like most teachers nowadays, they're not super happy with the way the world is going, and their $12,000 increase over 27 years of working, they're struggling. How do they change it if they want to do and be something different, or maybe what they're destined to be?
Yeah. So what I always tell people, because we have a lot of teachers who then leave and a lot of nurses who leave, and, just lots of people leaving traditional careers, is I tell people to first, this is the only time that I want you to get those problem glasses on, those black hat, like, let's just like dig deep into our negativity bias here for a second. And I want you to go out into the world. And I want you to start finding problems, and you will find there are a bazillion. They are everywhere. It is a plague. And then I want you to start to gather up all the problems that you could solve today with your eyes closed. If you're a mom, if you're a single mom, there's a lot of problems you can solve today with your eyes closed. And then we have this free challenge. It's called Offer to Impact. And basically we take people through an exercise of helping them discover their genius, because a lot of, like, a teacher, for example, doesn't necessarily recognize all the genius that she has in all the different ways. And so once you understand the problems that you're really excited, like, I'm going to wake up every day and I'm excited to solve that problem for that person. I'm a mom and I got my kids to sleep through the night, and I want to help other moms who are exhausted and bleary eyed and don't know how to get their kid to sleep. I can do that. I can help you with that. And then you attach yourself to that human who has that problem. And usually what we do is we start with a higher ticket offer, which I know makes beginners uncomfortable. But if you're going to start making money, you might as well get $500 or $1,000 for every customer versus $5 per customer. And so we go through a process of creating a $1,000, anywhere between $500 and $3,000, depending on your market. Create an offer, and I teach kind of the art of one-to-one sales and marketing to start to get some clients. Now, if you have a real drive to, like, solve a problem with a product, that's a little bit different, and that's a different path. But it starts with really getting clear on what problems you're willing to solve. Every single person who I've told, if you just become committed to solving problems, the money is going to come. It's when people get committed to ideas like, I want to run a membership, or I want to run SaaS, or I want to, they get committed to, like, somebody else's version of the business. They lose touch with the problem. They lose touch with the human who has the problem. And that's usually where spinning your wheels and losing money happens. But I've yet to see someone who falls in love with a human who has a problem and is committed to solving it that doesn't get a business off the ground. And so we have all kinds of products, templates, software where we help people take that journey.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a problem that you're solving.
Yes.
Ultimately, it's a problem right now where people feel stuck, where they feel like they can't get out of the situation that they're in. And there's a lot of high performers that spin their wheels. You and I have both met many entrepreneurs that have 7 different jobs. They have 7 different things they're doing at one time. Like, no, I'm going to do this. And then they switch again. And they really have all the tools to be successful inside, but they keep getting distracted in ways that don't allow them to dive deep into the opportunity. And I think when I started this podcast, I would say high performers, and people would say, well, I'm not a high performer. And I'm like, well, I don't define it that way. I define it as
Yeah.
somebody that knows they're destined for something bigger, that wants to help people, that wants to make an impact in the world, that believes their ego is not the number one thing and that there's something bigger than themselves. For us, it's God. For others, it's, it's whatever maybe it's the birds chirping in nature, but they need something bigger than themselves. And
Yeah.
then they have to show up with a healthy mind, body, and spirit. And I think what you're doing is you're providing them the ability to connect what they know they're good at into something
Yes.
that can make them some money. Now, there's a second part to that, the other problem, which is what the hell do I do when I'm making the money?
Yes.
How do I dictate? Do I all of a sudden like the situation I'm in less or more? How many people do we know that have made money and all of a sudden they no longer like their situation because they can change it?
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, there's lots of people that will build businesses and then, 3, 4 years down the road, they're like, I want to burn this business to the ground, or I want to leave my relationship, or I want to move out of this house. It just money does afford you the opportunity to pivot. It also illuminates, whatever you have inside will just get amplified with more money and more influence. So if you are naturally a depressed, anxious person, when you get more money, you will just be more anxious and more depressed because you will have more to lose. And so that's bad news. But the good news is that the ability to be happy, to find joy, to enjoy the process, all of that can start right now when you're making $0, because those values and character traits are going to get amplified um, with the more money that you have and the more influence that you have. And so it's a both and. It's good news and bad news. But I've known a lot of people who once they start making money, they're like, okay, that's great. I got the proverbial, shiny object that I wanted. I got the $1 million, I got the 2 million. I remember, I'll never forget. I don't know if you know the ClickFunnels 2 Comma Club Award. Are you
I'm
familiar with that?
familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's literally a shiny object. And it's if you make $1 million in a funnel. Now, I had gotten this 2 Comma Club award in 2017, and I had sort of come to realize the dog and pony show that was going on, the fact that the person you become when you make $1 million is the person that's not impressed with $1 million. So once you get there, you're not really impressed, and you realize, oh, that $1 million took me 500,000 to make, and so all this stuff happens. My business partner at the time hadn't yet gotten one, and she was like, she's just like, Julie, I want to get a 2 Comma Club award for Funnel Gorgeous. And I was like, okay, but I wasn't as motivated by that. And so she kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And so finally we did this big launch. We got to 1 million, and then we got the award, and then we were at Funnel Hacking Live. And then the morning that we're supposed to get the award, she texts me. She's like, can you come to my room? I'm crying. And I come in the room, she's sobbing. And I'm like, what's the matter with you? And she's like, it doesn't feel like I thought it was going to feel. And I was like, I told you that. She's like, why? And I was like, because you became the person who could make $1 million, which means you're not really impressed with $1 million. You understand what it takes. And now you're thinking about 2 million or 10 million. But by the time you get to 2 million or 10 million, you're not going to be impressed with that either, because you're going to have more problems, more. And she was like, God, that's so depressing. I said, it is depressing. Yes. And also, it's actually unbelievably freeing, because it means that you have access to happiness, joy, peace, contentment, all of those things right now, today, even when you haven't met your goals. And that actually unlocks really awesome potential for you if you stop waiting for the day when. And so, it's a hard lesson to learn, but once you learn it, it changes everything.
Yeah. Once you realize that money is just a tool and it's completely empty. Zig Ziglar said, if you spend your life chasing money, you'll never catch it because
Mhm.
it's always going to change. Right. But he said, if you did three things will make you successful in business, period. And number one is you have to help people, which you just said, find a problem and solve it. Help people. Number two is you have to turn a profit. A lot of people forget that you
Yeah.
have to make money in a business. Just because it's a good idea, if you're not making any money, it's not a business. Sorry, hate to burst your bubble. Number three is you have to serve something bigger than yourself. You have to serve God or something bigger than yourself, because if you are the only thing that sets this goal, you will always feel that emptiness. And I think of your partner sitting in the room sobbing And it's almost like the freeing part is to cross that off the list, that it's another thing I don't need in my life. It's
Yeah.
another thing that I'm not chasing.
Yeah.
Once you realize it can be just a tool, now you use it for the things you really want in life and only when you need it.
But, it's funny because there's so to be fair to the people who, are listening and are like, "Oh, that like I want to hit that." There's so much posturing about what it means to make a million or make 10 million. They're watching people and the Instagram stories and the revenue numbers and the Stripe
Yeah.
screenshots and all of this kind of stuff, and nobody's saying how much they're keeping, how much they're bringing home, how many tears it took you to make that money. And I have had this desire to kind of hold a 40 to 50% profit margin as much as possible in my business. And because of that, I haven't grown as fast. I've watched other people that I was sort of on par with. Right now, Funnel Gorgeous is doing about 4 million a year, are now 10, 20 million. And I'm sure they have more profit than we do, but I don't know how much more profit, because when the business goal is revenue, look at how many companies turn zero profit. Like, I don't think Uber has ever been profitable. You know what I mean? And so,
Right.
like, when that's your goal, an exit strategy, a multiple that you want to sell, like, profit is not even in the conversation. And I'm like, give me my 4 million, 50% profit margin business any day of the week over $100 million company with, a 2% profit margin, because I guarantee those headaches in that $100 million company are not headaches I want to have, unless I have a mission or a vision that's bigger and I need to impact more people. Then I'm willing to put up with that, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I always think of the fast growing pubescent boy, who's playing sports and
Yeah.
they grow super fast. And like I've coached a lot of soccer, and their feet become huge
Yep.
and their legs aren't moving the way they want to. And like 2 years earlier, they were awesome. And then they come out one day and their body has grown too fast for their ability. And
Yes.
that happens in businesses all the time. Now, if you're growing to sell and that's your only objective, build, 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 crush and walk away, that's one thing. But if you're building something bigger than yourself in a business, you
Yeah.
have to be building, and you have to slowly let the body catch up to the ability.
Exactly.
And it's a really, really great point. I've really enjoyed talking with you today, and we got to explore a lot of things. But we talked about your high performance life and how it got messy at some times, but you've been able to turn it into something special. And I want people to know how they can reach out to you. So what are the best ways, Julie, for people to find you, and to utilize you? And I also want you briefly, before you wrap it up, tell us about your mastermind, because you're doing a pretty big thing now that I think is kind of next iteration. And this would be the Digital Insiders, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. So I have two companies. So if you're listening and you are new to business and you're trying to get started, if you go to funnelgorgeous.com, that has free resources. It has low ticket courses. We have a coaching program. It's great. It's a great place to start. We also educate people, and not just women, men too, but on software, marketing automation software. If you're afraid of tech and you feel like you're overwhelmed with choices, funnelgorgeous.com is the place to go. If you are already in business and you are trying to scale, you are making at least, I'm going to just say around 250,000 a year, and you're trying to get over that $1 million mark and scale, I do have a private mastermind consultancy. It's digitalinsidersmastermind.com. And I've been running that mastermind for about 6 years. It has about 85 members. It has a great, unbelievably generous community of people. And it gives you access to 2 weeks a year of in-person masterminding, plus a ton of my content and one-on-one access to me. That's how I work with clients one-on-one, in business strategy and real marketing funnels, optimization, things like that. So you can go to Digital Insiders Mastermind and apply. If you see if we're a good fit, I'll hop on a call with you. Otherwise, you can go to Funnel Gorgeous and check out all the cool things over there.
So Julie Chenell, awesome businesswoman, awesome human. Thank you for being authentic and real and giving
Yeah.
us the whole story today. This is what listeners love to hear, and you've been amazing. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you liked it, there's more where this one came from. Click here and enjoy some more.